right, now we're on to the hands-on level training. What's great is when this class is taught in the classroom, professors can utilize all these different types of hands-on level academy training classes to add a little bit of fun in to say, hey, I know this is a lot of work, this hiring process to get hired, but look at all the fun things you get to do. So we're going to go over them very briefly here. Your textbook goes into them more, and then the professor can bring in, either teach it themselves or bring in law enforcement professionals to help teach them. But one of the best ways to do that is include classes on all of these: firearms, less lethal, emergency vehicles, defensive tactics, DUI, criminal law, domestic violence, and then here's a whole bunch of more. And they're just so important because the sooner you can start opening your mind to this training, you're going to be trained in the academy, of course, but it's a lot. They're throwing a lot at you over a 5 to 6 month process, and the more you can it be second nature, the better it is. All right, so we're going to go over some basic things here that I think every candidate should know before they get into any law enforcement related career, and that is the most common primary duty semi-automatic handgun calibers. That means, what are you going to be carrying if you decide to be an officer? What kind of handgun at your side? And the most common calibers are 9mm that you see listed here, and this just shows you the difference of the cartridges, and these are called cartridges, not bullets. I'll tell you why in a minute. Just really a hint, that top part's only the bullet, so the whole thing is the cartridge. Then we have a 40 caliber, and then a 45. So those are the three most common calibers, and I just basically had some other calibers here to show you some pictures, but here's another picture of a 45, a 40, and a 9mm. All right, let's continue on. Firearms. So there's many manufacturers, just like clothing. You have Nikes, Adidas, you have Reebok, just like cars. You have Ford, Dodge, Chevy. I could go on and on. Firearms are the same thing, and depending on who you are, you may think yours is the best. Here's just a page of all of the many manufacturers, Springfield, Glock, Smith & Wesson, SIG, Kimber, Ruger, those are big ones, Beretta, H&K, Remington. It just depends on the department on which they will allow their officers to carry. All right, continuing on. The two most kind of firearms that are seen on the streets are the revolver and semi-automatic handgun. Now, while the officers don't carry revolvers anymore, maybe possibly as a backup, but not as a primary duty weapon, they carry semi-automatics here on the right. Revolvers could still be carried as a backup. They're a great firearm to learn to shoot with, and they're also seen on the street a lot, which officers have to handle firearms, so you need to know the difference. And the textbook goes over the various parts. While each of these handguns has hundreds of parts, the officer that carries it's only required to know about 10 of those, maybe a little less, maybe a little more when you clean it. The armorer that's been to a 1 or 2 or 3 week armor school for that manufacturer of gun and caliber will be the one that takes that apart once a year to really clean it. All right, AR-15. So first of all, this is one area that a lot of students don't understand, because AR does not stand for automatic rifle. It stands for Armalite rifle. So Armalite is the manufacturer. And the AR-15 is, if you look at it, you can see this whole thing right here is just the stock to hold it against your shoulder. That's the handle, that's the magazine, and then you have the barrel. And that's the trigger. So it's very, very basic. But the biggest thing for the AR-15 is it's very good for long range. So it's very accurate at approximately 100 to 6,000 yards, and some models can even go over half a mile. An officer's primary handgun only goes about 25 yards, not 100 to 600 yards. So it shows you why, if you're at longer distances, you need another tool. Shotguns. All right, the most popular, this is the Remington 870 Police 12 gauge shotgun. And that is the most popular in policing. And then we have less lethal firearms. What's really cool about them is this is the Remington 870 less lethal. It's just painted orange. And the reason why is the cartridges that are utilized, instead of having steel little BBs or one slug metal, they have a bean bag in them. So they can be deadly if they hit a person in a certain place on their body, like their head or temple. So officers train to hit in different locations where it's going to hurt, it's going to leave a bruise, but that's why it's called less lethal. All right. There's also what's called the 40mm rubber ball launcher. This is really cool. This is the rubber ball launcher. This is the rubber ball that comes out, only the top part. I've seen them only in blue. And this is it. That's just basically the stock that folds down. That's the handle. That's the trigger. Then you put in the cartridge and it comes out at the end. It has a scope on it with a little red laser light. They're pretty cool and again, less lethal if utilized correctly. All right, cartridges. I go through this in your textbook. It's not called a bullet because if you see on this picture, the bullet is only the tip part that comes out of the barrel of the gun. The whole thing is called the cartridge, and that's very important because you can find all different parts of these at a crime scene, and if you call it wrong, you're going to be misleading a possible jury and could lose a conviction of a suspect who killed somebody because of improperly identifying a cartridge. So as you can see on there, the very tip is called the bullet, and there's all different types of bullets. Then you have the cartridge case or the bullet case. Then you have the propellant or the gunpowder inside. And finally, on the very tip head, you have the primer. So the firing pin, when you pull the trigger, hits the primer. That causes an explosion with the propellant and gunpowder, and the bullet then comes out of the barrel of the gun. All right, magazine or clip. So as you can see on the left, that's a clip. Those cartridges are not under the pressure of a spring, where if you have a magazine, when you load those, gosh, when you load them all day and you're out at the range, your thumb gets tired because you're loading them against a spring, and the more you get in, the harder it is. So that is the difference between a magazine and a clip. All right, firearm safety rules. So I always, I've adapted these to my own use when I go out to the range, but number one, always keep a firearm pointed in a safe direction. 2, always keep your finger off the trigger until ready to fire. And 3, every gun is loaded. Once you get these in your head, safety is of the utmost. And it's important to understand that deadly force is used to stop the threats. A misunderstood concept in the use of deadly force is to stop a deadly threat. Those in law enforcement often state that law enforcement officers shoot to kill. Those not in law enforcement. That's a misnomer because law enforcement officers are trained to shoot until the threat stops. So as long as the deadly threat continues, the officer is trained to continue firing if they feel that deadly threat. However, once the threat stops, the officer is trained to stop firing. All right, now we're going on to DUI. This can be so fun teaching HGN, and I go into the textbook about, and then how you can actually start utilizing it now, how horizontal gaze nystagmus can be seen in the eyes, and there's 3 different tests, 3 for the left, 3 for the right eye, that you can perform very easily, and it's very cool to go through, and students love learning about it. Also on the DUI test, we call them standardized field sobriety tests. Oops, we were on DUI, went over HGN. Sorry, I mixed that up. But anyway, HGN is a standardized field sobriety test is what we call them. There's a whole bunch of them out there. When you go through DUI training in the academy, you'll learn them all. But the most used are the HGN, the walk and turn, and the one-leg stand. All right, there are also drug recognition experts. So if you go into your police department and they're looking for DREs, they call them, I highly recommend it. It is a way that you go out, you are trained, you have to perform a number of field certifications and be able to describe the environment, and you're able to recognize by doing all of these different field observations what type of drugs the person is under. It's pretty cool. All right, HGN, so here's the HGN. I already showed you the picture, so that was the HGN picture. And then we have the walk and turn test. So your walk and turn test, again, is where you have a line and there's certain instructions. And again, I have a video of this and explain it more in the textbook. Then you have the one-leg stand test. And again, this is where the person holds up one leg while they count aloud. All right, that ends this hands-on video.